Hello, this is Dragon Keeper 96600 with the film and commentary. This is the 1995 version of The Wind in the Willows. I only discovered this film recently, but I found it so delightful that I knew right away that I wanted to talk about it. This is a made-for-TV version that aired 1995. Actually, I looked it up, and aired on Christmas Day 1995. And it was released by a company, or a channel, I guess, called TVC. I think is what it was called. It was Television Cartoon, TVC London, something like that. And I was actually surprised when I found out that this was made for TV, because I know this segment is right here is live action, and this film is actually bookended with live action segments. But the majority of the film is animated, and it's really, really good animation. Like, it's top notch. It's really fluid and expressive, and when I first saw the film, I assumed that it was a theatrical release. But no, this is a made-for-TV film. And maybe if you look at the time code and see how long it is, you could probably guess that, oh yeah, this is a TV thing. But yeah. So The Wind in the Willows is a work that I was kind of familiar with as a kid. I did not, like I said, watch this version as a kid. I think this version in general is much more well-known in the UK than it is in the States. How I first learned of Wind in the Willows was, first of all, Wind in the Willows is one of those works that has roughly 50 million adaptations, give or take. Every single art medium or creative medium in existence has at least 12 Wind in the Willows adaptations because it's that beloved. There's, first of all, even though Kenneth Grahame, who's the writer of the original novel, never wrote a sequel to my knowledge, there's tons of unofficial sequels and spin-off books and POV books, deconstructing and reconstructing the story. There's, movies like this one, animated and live action. There's stage shows. There's a goddamn ride at Disney World. There are podcasts. There's at least 2 versions that are gender bent. So yes, they have done the Ghostbusters remake treatment to the story. And the version that I was familiar with as a kid was the Cosgrove Hall version. So if you've ever seen the stop-motion version of the story, that was done by an animation studio that's still around today called Cosgrove Hall. And I, as a kid, owned a box set of 4 VHSs. And the idea was that each VHS, I guess, stood for a season. So there's a spring one, summer one, and so on. And then each of the seasonal VHSs had 3 episodes that took place in that season. So they weren't really in any particular order because VHSs back in the day were kind of arranged by whatever the fuck. But that was my introduction to Wind in the Willows. And that was from the series, because Cosgrove Hall did a movie first and then a follow-up series. So the movie actually follows the plot of the book, whereas the series are standalone episodes. So I wasn't actually familiar with the plot of the main book until much later. So the animation segment has started, and you can see already, it looks pretty good. When you see, a still frame of this animation, it doesn't look that great. Something about the art style and the coloring doesn't really appeal to me. The thumbnail for this video that I got off YouTube involves Mole and the rowboat, and just looking at the thumbnail, it doesn't look that great. But as soon as they move, it's oh wow! The only thing I could really say in terms of criticism is that maybe they move around a little bit too much, to the point it doesn't quite feel natural. But that's really my only complaint. It's the closest thing to criticism I have. I feel like this animation is really well done. Like a lot of versions of Wind in the Willows, this version has some stars. All 4 of the main animals are played by pretty big-time actors, at least in the UK. I don't know how well-known all of them are in the States, or internationally. The one I know is probably the biggest name internationally is Michael Gambon, who plays Badger. And you might recognize his name, because he's the guy who played Professor Dumbledore, starting in movie 3 of the Harry Potter series. So yes, he is the "Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire" guy. Fire, as he says. And, is it bad to say that I like his performance in this movie better than in the Harry Potter movies? No, I don't think that's weird. So, this film is, I couldn't find any contemporary reviews, and honestly, I didn't look that hard for it. But from what I understand, it was pretty well received when it came out. It was said in, like, Wikipedia that it was popular with critics and audiences, and if you can't trust Wikipedia, who can you trust? It did get a sequel called The Willows in Winter, which is based off one of the unofficial sequel books that had the same cast. So Michael Gambon is back as, as Badger, and everybody else is back too. Weirdly, Badger sounds more like Dumbledore in the sequel than he does in this film.
My young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half as much worth doing as simply messing about in boats.
So, I think this story is very, very beloved, not just in the UK, though especially in the UK, but just in a lot of other countries as well. And I think a lot of the appeal is it's just pleasant, and a lot of it is just very relaxing. And I've heard the word cottagecore used to describe it.
Whether you never get anywhere at all, you're always busy. Nothing in particular.
So Mole just steps out of his house for the first time, meets this guy, gets in his boat, and hang on, have I been kidnapped? I mean, kind of. He's stuck at his house. He can't get back on his own. And after this, like, meal, she shares lunch with Ratty. One meal with him, and then he lives with him. For, like, he spends the next 9 months living in his house without going back home. Like, was Mole abducted? He never thinks of it that way, but as an adult watching this, I'm like, hang on.
And you live by it?
By it and with it and on it and in it.
So, like a lot of other adaptations also, this one, a lot of the dialogue is word for word from the book.
Winter, summer,
And I don't blame these adaptations for using the dialogue from the book, because it really is well-written dialogue. Like,
no one else. The banks
It's-
are too crowded nowadays.
it's got a lot of personality and can convey a lot of information in not that many, like, lines. And a lot of this dialogue is just fun to say. I don't know, it's just fun.
Riverbankers don't go there much.
Aren't the people there very nice?
Oh yeah, they're wonderful. That's why we don't go there.
Rabbit, some of them. And there's dear old Badger, wouldn't live anywhere else if you paid him. There are
Ratty! Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? I'm quite curious.
goats, foxes. All right in a way, but you can't really trust them.
And beyond the wildwood?
Lies the wide world. I'm never going there, and nor will you, if you've got any sense. Don't ever refer to it again.
Weirdly, you'd think after a line like that, Mole would at some point go to the wide world. Nope. Kind of weird that it was emphasized so much, but nah. Let's just eat lunch. I looked up, I remembered there's a term for it, and I looked it up. Basically, there's this genre name for anime, even though this is not an anime, that's supposed to just, the word apparently means healing, and it just describes the genre of anime and manga that's just supposed to be, like, relaxing and comforting. I think it's called, like, Iyashike or something like that. And I kind of think of that genre when I think of Wind in the Willows. It's like, this is just straight up, like, visual comfort food. Not that the whole story is relaxing and idyllic. It's, the segments with Toad later can especially get pretty crazy. It's kind of funny that... Oh,
Phew, my dear old fella, do come and...
Badger's a bit of an introvert. And as a fellow introvert, I can confirm that I spend a lot of time at dinner parlors crawling around on the ground, chasing beetles, and growling at people.
Everything brand new.
I'm a little confused that the otter needs swimming goggles.
Then it was punting. Then it was houseboating. Always the same. Whatever Toad takes up, he soon gets...
Oh, there he is.
starts on something fresh.
So Toad in this movie is played by British comedy legend Rick Mayall. He's a pretty big name in the UK, but sadly the thing that he's most well known for here in the States is probably Drop Dead Fred. And I say sadly because Drop Dead Fred is not his best stuff. Though as I understand it, that movie does have fans. I seem to recall hearing something about a remake at some point. I don't know if that remake ever surfaced.
Yes. Look, old man, perhaps it's time we packed up too,
about
And true to their word, they pack up. This movie boldly says what it's about to do and then does it.
Rather think not.
I think I'd be rather good at it, you know, being rather
It looks like the backgrounds were like colored with pastels or something.
pretty quick on the uptake. It can't be as difficult as
It does, like I said, it looks nice when it's in motion, but something about like still shots of it, I don't know.
Hang the beastly theory. I want to go. Sit down. Let go. Let go. I say.
No,
I'm determined to shove.
This is our first action scene. Oh my god, so exciting. Oh gosh. Guys, they fell in. Wow. The pie! Oh god.
Ratty, whatever can I say?
there's absolutely no need.
Oh, but there is.
So I remember as a kid watching the Cosgrove Hall series. The character that I liked most was Mr. Mole. The reason I liked it, I just liked the type of character that he was, which was like this,
You forgive me.
I guess what people on the internet would describe as a soft boy, though that sounds a bit patronizing. Just this very like sensitive and meek soul. Nevertheless, who is capable of having a spine when he's pushed. And also his design, especially in the Cosgrove Hall series, is really, really cute. Like, it's with the round face, and he's like, in that version at least, he's the shortest and portliest of the characters. And like, he has this outfit in like the cold weather episodes where he like wears this wrap around his head. It looks so precious, like a little babushka mole.
Until the glowing tiredness of the long day.
What I was going to say earlier about like the weird structure of Wind in the Willows is that it's funny that it gets adapted so much is because it has the actual novel has a structure that's not super easy to adapt. We start off with our main character seems to be Mole, and a lot of the early chapters focus on these vignettes between Mole and Ratty, and it kind of like this idyllic, and like each chapter stands as an independent story. But then after we introduce Toad, slowly but surely Toad's story kind of takes over the novel. And it becomes like switching between like these chapter episodes with Mole and Ratty to like this ongoing story arc with Toad. And the climax of the story centers on Toad, so it almost reads like Mole is supplanted as main character by Toad.
He's rather rich, you know. His house really is one of the nicest
And
parts, though we never
as a result of the vignette structure with Mole's half of the book, some of the chapters with Ratty and Mole are two chapters in particular called Wayfarers All and The Pied Piper at the Gates of Dawn are frequently cut from adaptations. This one includes both of those chapters, and it does kind of result in some structural weirdness when they cut from Toad's story, which is like not self-contained and is an ongoing arc.
It's a delight.
And it goes to like this vignette with Mole and Ratty. It's like, can we get back to the Toad, please?
It's only my way.
So, TV Tropes describes this performance by Rick Mail as, quote-unquote, hammier than a sandwich.
No matter what,
And it's pretty great. Like,
know how lucky it is.
so on the YouTube comments for this movie, most of the comments that talk about the actors, most of them are praising Rick Mail as Toad. Like, they're all like, Rick Mail is hilarious as Toad, or like, they couldn't have gotten anybody better than Rick to play Toad.
Devote the rest of
And the rest of the comments are commenting on how weird it is to hear Dumbledore's badger. But like, the Rick Mail comments weirdly outnumber the others.
the dusty highway.
He actually won an Emmy for the sequel, Willows in Winter. But not for this one, which is a shame, because he totally could have won it for this one, too.
Somewhere else tomorrow. Travel, change, excitement. A horizon that's always changing. And mine is
So,
the finest of its kind.
TV Tropes has the theory,
Planned by
it's not really a theory, it's just kind of an observation, that a lot of Toad's personality, about him throwing himself 100% into these hobbies and quickly abandoning them, and like, getting so invested.
find when we make our
And basically, the argument is that he shows all the signs of bipolar disorder. He's basically a textbook case. And
dear good
I remember reading this and thinking, oh my god, I never thought of that, but it totally fits. I seriously doubt that that was the intent, the original novel, but if you're actually looking for that, and if you have that interpretation in mind, it really makes a lot of sense. He shows both manic episodes where he's like, has like
and live in a hole.
these grandiose moods and poor impulse control, and also depressive episodes, which are less talked about but are definitely there. he sulks pretty badly when his...
No worries.
Look at the motor mouth, he just can never stop talking.
Hey, I say, Ratty, take some
And
punishment too.
because, you know, later in the story, Wind in the Willows is, like, pretty well known, so I don't know if I have to flag spoilers or anything, but later in the story, once he gets arrested, the book goes on about he was really crushed by his prison sentence, and he lies in his cell for, like, weeks at a time, refusing food, and, like,
Talk about your...
yeah, there are times when he feels very, very up, and times where he feels very down.
I don't talk about my river. You know I don't. But I think about it. I think about it all the time.
Why don't you just marry the river if it's so important to you? Maybe I will.
Just clear everything up.
Me and the ocean are going steady. I'm funny, I swear I am.
Shall we run away tomorrow morning very early and go back to our dear old hole on the river?
I'd like to go back to your dear old. I'm sorry, I can't. It seems sacrilegious to make that kind of joke about this, but
Take long.
a lot of people have pointed out how very, very close Ratty and Mole are, to a level that you probably don't think anything of as when you're a kid, but when as an adult, it's kind of eyebrow-raising that two grown men would become this intimate this quickly.
Give a flick of the wrist, and away you skim.
I talk about how he moves in with Ratty basically immediately. And you know that line about, always stick to you, whatever you want to do, Ratty?
Onwards and upwards.
It kind of reminds a lot of people of the series Frog and Toad Are Friends. Where, like, that Frog and Toad Are Friends was actually, like, the writer's daughter. I don't remember the writer's name, but his daughter basically... The writer basically later came out as gay in his life. And his daughter has said that Frog and Toad was kind of his way of coming to terms with his sexuality. Not that there's any sexual content in the series, but like showing this intimate relationship between these two male characters kind of...
Poop. Poetry of motion. The only way to...
So I've seen a lot of different versions of this scene in different adaptations. Basically, if Toad doesn't look completely love-struck, you're not doing it right.
I think I never knew. All those
He said a bad word!
never even dreamt. Oh. But now, oh, what dust clouds are
Honestly, as someone who's been through hyperfixations in my life, I can kind of relate.
fling carelessly into the ditch.
Sort of.
Carts. Common
I was never crazy about driving, though.
colored carts.
What are we to do with him?
Nothing. At all.
I'm a little confused that they have a canary in a cage
I'm done with
when they're talking animals.
provoking.
And this is a detail that's from the book, too, as they mention that there's a canary in a cage in the cart, and that after the crash, it's like begging and tweeting to be let out, and they don't let it out, which is kind of dickish of them now that I think about it.
Quite hopeless.
Ah, yes, horse butt transition. The best kind. Look at that shot. Ooh. Ooh. Thomas Kincaid painting.
How about this, Molly? It's called Duck's Ditty. All along the backwater, through the...
You know, there's a very specific type of person that you can share your poetry with,
Everyone...
and that would be very few people.
Heads down, tails up,
I'm sorry, I'm not crazy about poetry. I know people who are poets, but I've always struggled with it myself.
tails all.
I don't think much of that, Rat.
Nor do they. They say, why can't we do what we like when we
I like how the ducks are
without having perch...
not anthropomorphic, but they still talk.
Nonsense it all.
Basically, as far as I can tell, all the animals in Wood in the Willows can talk, at least in the novel. Though we don't always actually see their dialogue in quotes. The way that this story in general treats the furries is weird. Because you would think this would be like a setting like Zootopia, where all the animals, like all the characters are animals, and it's just animals are the only type of thing that exist. But then later we see human characters, quite a lot of human characters, and they're just kind of casually coexisting with the furries. And honestly, I do kind of like that. It kind of reminds me of the Sonic games in the 2000s, where like these humans are just kind of coexisting with these big-headed, glove-wearing animals, and everybody's just kind of cool with it. And I do kind of miss that in modern Sonic games.
To a music he could not understand. But they were wrong.
I'm sorry, slurping noises.
Uncontrollable longings stirring within
So this
to travel.
scene is based off the Wayfarers All chapter in the novel, which is one of the chapters that gets cut from a lot of adaptations,
And then to the Adriatic Sea.
where Ratty abruptly gets wanderlust and Mole has to like basically tackle him to the ground to get him to snap out of it.
Mind's eye, he saw
And you can kind of see why it's cut, because it doesn't add anything. Because it only involves Mole stopping Ratty. It doesn't have any lesson implications. It doesn't like mark anything in Rat or Mole's character development because nothing comes of it. But like this sequence does look very nice.
Then, by different ships to Sicily,
With all these different scenes and the nice animation and colors and stuff.
where the wine casks were dropped overboard.
I haven't said anything much about our narrator yet. To be perfectly honest, I don't really like the live-action framing device of this. I feel like the film could have functioned fine without it. I don't think it really adds anything. Like, I don't care about Vanessa Redgrave's grandchildren. However, Vanessa Redgrave herself, the narration is pretty nice, and there's no reason something like this couldn't have narration.
Oh, Ratty, been far?
South.
Because much like the dialogue, though maybe not as much, the narration is a beloved part of the novel. The narrator of Wind in the Willows can get kind of sarcastic at times, especially when talking about Toad.
With the rest of them. Seawards first and then on shipboard. To the shore.
And, since this story is based so heavily on, like, independent vignettes, having a narrator to set up these scenes can't help. Vanessa Redgrave herself is a star. She's actually,
My old friend.
still alive. Most of the main cast in this are still alive. She's actually in her late 80s and still actively working as an actress, which is pretty impressive.
See voices.
I looked her up on Wikipedia, and it says that she comes from a long line of actors. All of the previous Redgraves were actors. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And she's said she's from the Redgrave dynasty of actors. And I'm like, the Redgrave dynasty. English people are very strange.
The nuts together. And remember how you said you loved watching the harvest being brought home? And the haystacks growing higher and higher?
So, it might confuse some people exactly what Ratty is supposed to be. A lot of adaptations, including the Disney version, fall into the trap of portraying him as, well, a rat. Like the type of rat, like a sewer rat or like a domestic rat. But that's not actually the kind of animal he is. He's not really a rat. He's actually a type of animal called a water vole nowadays. Though he's often described as a water rat in the book. A water vole is an animal native to the UK that lives among the waterways. And it sort of looks like... It doesn't really look like a rat or an otter, but sort of like this crossbreed animal.
Going for a stroll?
And you could tell this version is
Tobacco,
like
maybe?
draws him more like a water rat, though he's more like lanky to give him more of an anthropomorphized shape, because real water voles are very round, puffy creatures. Sadly, water voles, though they were once common in the UK, are now critically endangered. I actually saw this video for BBC that was talking about like the efforts to like breed water voles and reintroduce them into the wild. And it was like called Saving Ratty, I think, because like everyone in the UK, or at least a lot of people would know that like that's the species that Ratty is. One comment I kind of like in that YouTube video is like, I love these animals, they're really cute, but they do look like they would go extinct if you take your eyes off them for 5 seconds. Something like that. The main thing killing them off, when I could tell, is just loss of habitat. Just human development is reducing the areas where they can live. So this whole sequence of Mole lost in the wildwood, what it kind of reminds me of is the sequence in Disney's Snow White, where like Snow White is stumbling through the forest and she sees that trees look like things.
Must find badgers.
I love the description in the book that the weasels are kind of waging psychological warfare on him by like circling him and making these noises to psych him out, which is weirdly a little bit similar to how real weasels hunt. Weasels are like vicious creatures that are capable of taking down prey several times their size. They hunt rabbits, which are bigger than them, and the way they do it is they kind of jump and roll and somersault toward the rabbit, so the rabbit can see it coming, but the way it moves, something about that snake-like back and forth jumping crazy kind of like almost has a hypnotic effect on the rabbit, and the rabbit is so mesmerized by the movement that it doesn't run, and the weasel's able to pounce on it and kill it. The reason weasels have a bad reputation in the UK is back to the days where like a lot of people were farmers. A weasel could very easily get into like your farm and especially your hen house or your chicken coop. And if one weasel gets in there, it could easily wipe out the entire coop by itself. Because as I read this description once in Life of Pi, that in predators, the urge to kill is separate from the urge to eat. So a weasel won't eat all the chickens by itself, but it'll just keep killing them because that's what its instinct tells it to do. And you could just lose your whole brood in one go. And because they're so skinny and so flexible, they can get through like small holes in your fence that like a fox, for example, can't get through. So this is a reputation of them being like thieves and sneaky and horrible. People hating them. As people become more educated about animals in general, I think that the kind of some of the stigma gets fuck. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to swear. You just don't really expect a cartoon character to whip out a pistol anymore. That's right, I've got a gun. I'm not afraid to use it. And a cudgel. He's got a cudgel too. Drive me to extinction, will you? The water voles are attacking! They're in the trees! No, Ratty, that's a scarf. Oh, look, he's so cute. I love animals.
Really you? Molly?
He sank into the tree! Where's the rest of him?
I've been so frightened.
He just pulls him out and he's just a head.
You really shouldn't have gone and done it, Mole. I did my best to keep
Just even the simplest movement in this animation, it looks so good. Just him stepping into the tree. I can't really say what it is I find so striking about it. I know I said at the beginning that I don't like the colors, but there are some moments like this dark night lighting where it looks very cinematic. Yeah, Toad is stupid, but he's not that stupid.
I'm dreadfully sorry, Ratty, but I'm dead beat. If I don't rest a while and get my strength back, I'll...
All right. Rest
God, you're a baby. I love you.
Anyhow, there should be a bit of a moon later to help us find our way.
We could kiss by it and maybe touch each other. I'm sorry. I can't stop. I don't know where my mind goes to these places. Yes, we'll just wait here and then we can walk later. Then they get snowed in. It's like, oh, Mole. I hate you. I hate everything about you. JK.
Mole, time to be off.
I will be using you to plow the snow. You're a mole. You just put your feet in front of you and start digging.
Hello.
What's up?
Snow's up, or rather down.
Freddy's voice is very nice.
Well, we must take our chance, I suppose. The worst of it is, I don't know where we are. Everything looks so different.
We're in the Wild Wood, Ratty. Thank you. That's so helpful. I'll fight the snow. The snow effect is a little thick in these shots. Also, it seems to be going up.
Something may turn up.
Sometimes it seemed to be raining straight up.
Oh, my poor leg. Oh, my. I must have tripped on a branch.
Poor old Moley. Not having much luck, are you?
He's like a little kid. Did you hurt yourself again, Mr. Mole? Do you need a timeout?
It's just the same. Whatever done it.
Whatever did it?
So this sequence is one of those that's almost exactly word for word from the novel. And it kind of results in a bit of sluggishness, I think, because, like, since they're reciting the exact lines in the exact sequence and going through all the motions, it comes across that both of them are, especially Mole, are kind of dumb. And I get the idea that Mole has been out all night and he's in a bad mood and he's all punch drunk from the fatigue, but even so, he comes across as a real dumbass.
You told me nothing whatever. Go on. Dance another.
I know it's supposed to be funny, but
Found another piece of litter.
just because you do a scene exactly as it is in a book doesn't mean that it's the best choice.
Sledge home on
But honestly, all my criticism for this movie is going to be pretty light, because I do think this is a really good adaptation.
Doormats tell one nothing. Doormats know their place.
Thick-headed beast.
So, maybe this is a good time to talk about this. Wind in the Willows, a lot of the time, it's really hard to tell what the scale of everything is supposed to be. Because a lot of these descriptions, it seems like they're like the size of actual animals. And that's definitely the case in the Disney version. And it seems to be at this point, because look at how high the trees are above them. And they can fit like inside a tree, and they're like digging through the snow for like a door, which would be a lot harder to miss. I think it was a human-shaped door. And while they stand taller than the weasels, they don't stand that much taller. And the weasels are weirdly non-anthropomorphic, so you figure they're the size of real weasels, and weasels are not big animals. But, like I said, this also has, like, human characters, and, like, how is Toad driving a car like he does later if he's the size of an actual toad? How can they coexist with humans and operate alongside them if they're so radically different in size? It doesn't help that a lot of illustrations like draw them with inconsistent sizes. Like sometimes they're tiny and can fit, and a human would be capable of carrying them in one hand, and then other times they stand like past a human's waist. And like Cosgrove Hall version at least draws the animals on the same scale as the humans. So like Toad is only like a head shorter than the jailer's daughter who helps him escape. But yeah, scaling issues. So the inconsistencies in adaptations are probably born from inconsistencies in the original.
Alarming as he appeared on first acquaintance, was in fact the kindliest and...
So badgers are another animal that have gotten kind of a bad rep, and it's for similar reasons to weasels, that they are vicious creatures. A badger is not afraid of anything. A badger will kick your ass.
Visitors could expect not only comfortable lodgings, but also all the pleasures of a well-loaded table.
Listen to my velvety voice.
All he ever wanted in return was the latest news from the river bank.
Every week a new motor car,
Bigger and shinier
and more expensive,
and more powerful.
with which to terrorise the neighbourhood. And everyone ends in disaster.
His coach house is piled to the roof with wrecked machinery.
He persists in the belief that he's a heaven-born driver.
No respect for the law.
No, it's disgraceful.
And rich as he is, if he goes on like this, he'll finish up bankrupt.
Oh, much, much worse. Oh, my.
Why are you laughing?
So,
In this adaptation, Mole has a weird habit of like laughing and smiling at things that he shouldn't.
Now look here.
Maybe he's just so caught up with the excitement of things actually happening instead of being underground all the time that he just gets carried away, but I don't know. It's not just like a weirdness like in The Room where Tommy Wiseau laughs at stuff that he shouldn't. Like it's acknowledged as weird by the other character. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going on about.
Force, if need be. We'll make him sensible.
right you are, Badger.
If Michael Gambon wanted to make me do something, I'd be pretty scared.
Toad that ever was before we've done with him.
I fancy you know
Toad! He like shows up at his doorway, his eyes are gleaming. Breathe!
so bad, man. Live, let live.
Did you put your name
Don't fret, Reddy.
on the motor car? Sorry for the slurping noises. I have to stay hydrated talking this much for these commentaries.
Hold on, come back.
We can't stop now, Mole.
Ratty, I want you quick. It's close.
Oh no, finally!
It is. We'll come back for it.
Sorry, these jokes are just too easy.
It's getting even
This is kind of, I guess that's kind of common in British vernacular to say I want you when you want someone for something, but like,
Do catch up, Mole.
I don't know if it still has the same connotation nowadays, but I remember there's a joke in the Mystery Science Theater. What were they watching? Was The Projected Man? Where British character says to another, like, I want you, as in, like, I want to talk to you. And Mike goes, oh, sir, finally. And, like, for the rest of the episode, they keep making jokes about, I want you.
On my own little home, and I was fond of it. And I went away and left it. And,
Come.
and just now I scented it. And it just stopped, and I thought my heart would break.
Aww.
What a pig I've been.
So like I said, this movie aired on Christmas Day, which is a little weird because I don't think there's a ton that's super Christmassy in it. It does have a lot of themes about like friendship and love and stuff, so maybe that's enough. But it's weird because there's a really nice scene that takes place around this point in the novel where Rat and Mole go to Mole's house, and first of all, the scene as it is in the movie is very nice and like heartwarming and stuff. But in the novel also, a chorus of field mice show up basically singing Christmas carols. And so they get invited in and like they have Christmas dinner with them. And it's all very warm and a loving scene. And it is very Christmassy. So it seems weird that this film that I think maybe the Christmas Day scheduling was made later after like production had already started. But I like it seems weird that the scene that most relates to Christmas was cut.
What a neglected, cheerless place to bring you.
Like the buckets from the whitewashing out. I love the Tumblr comment that like
So compact and snug.
commented like my man Mole really just said whitewashing and then did it. He left his house for 9 months and didn't come back.
They belong to my granddad.
Everything you need. What a beautiful bed.
So this is a really heartwarming moment from Ratty, who just like he sees how important Mole's house is to him, so he cheers him up, helps him clean. Finally, 9 months later, they get the cleaning done. So he's talking about like how great it is, and like in the Christmas scene in the novel, he like sends out a kid to go buy a bunch of stuff so they can eat it with the Christmas chorus. I don't know. It's just, Rat's swell. He's a bro. Even if you don't interpret their relationship as romantic, and there's no reason you shouldn't. Rat's a real one.
A good friend, the plainest of things is a banquet. And what if...
Really? Isn't that what Christmas is all about? Even if we're not going to acknowledge that it's Christmas at any point?
There always came that...
Also, my question is, how is the goldfish still alive if they've been neglected for 9 months? What have they been eating?
So much that had been good during the 12
We raided your
months gone
cupboard.
by.
We just crawled out and got to
Not
it.
only for looking back,
We drank all your Pepsi.
but for looking forward. Looking
I find that disturbing.
to the rebirth of the world, out of the dying remnants of the old year, in the spring.
So it's spring again. It's now been a year since this story started. Is that the same area where his house was? Can't be. I haven't talked much about the score. It is nice. You hear that leitmotif with some kind of woodwind instrument. I can't tell what it is. It does stick in your head. I really like the theme from the Cosgrove Hall one. Sometimes I find myself humming it. The wind in the willows sing softly to me. Follow my voice wherever it leads.
Mr. Badger.
Yeah, I know what my name is, thank you. So this scene coming up, where they basically stage an intervention for Toad, is my favorite scene in this movie. It really showcases Rick Mayall's hamminess, which is great. And the animation is good. The animation is good throughout the whole movie. It's just kind of a turning point in the movie where it goes from the vignette structure to the more, like, story-based one. Though they don't it is clumsy at times the way they handle the dual plots with Toad's ongoing arc and then Mole and Ratty's continued adventures. But it does kind of mark the point where that split properly starts. This whole sequence is really great. Look at his little driver outfit. He's just crammed in that stuff.
Just in time, I say, for a
Restrain him!
I'm a little sad that I haven't had as many attempts to shout "restrain him" in my life as I would like.
Go inside. I'm going for a drive.
Like hell you are.
You won't be wanted today. Mr. Toad has changed his mind.
No, Badger. I demand at least the next
The chauffeur's like, holy shit, a talking badger!
This car is...
It's the work of the devil, it is!
That is final.
Call the police. They've all got mad. Start the engine.
So, as well-meaning as Toad's friends are, I don't think that this was the right approach. You can't actually legally, like, prevent someone from buying a car and hold them hostage in their own home, which is basically what they do. It gets even better here where they strip him under Badger's orders. And unlike other versions where they pull off his driving gear and he's wearing his suit and pants underneath, they strip him down to his underwear in this.
Bad name with your furious
I don't know why Toad wears garters.
to say you're sorry and to promise
No good.
To never put your name in the goblet of fire! Oh my god.
that you'll give up your
If you've reached a point in your life where you're holding down your friend and stripping them as they threaten and beg you to stop, maybe you need to rethink some of the choices you made in your life.
Promise that the next time I see a motor car, I'll find you in it.
quick, Molly, lock him up.
No, stop it. No, let go of me.
So this version of Wind in the Willows is... You may not believe it because it's been mellow up to now, but maybe you will believe it when seeing this animation. It's one of the more energetic adaptations, and the portrayal of Toad is even more madcap than the Disney version. But that's what you get when you hire Rick Mayall. You can hear him... I love that you can hear him just screaming fairly on the other side of the door. Remember what I was saying earlier about bipolar disorder? I do like how a lot was conveyed there without much dialogue. He just sees the sheet and damn, Mr. Toad be thick, though. Where's he going with all that? Sorry.
It's going to be a tedious business.
Oh, Badger, I'm trying to evade the police, but I'm dummy thick and the clap of my ass cheeks is alerting the constable,
Instant unguarded.
he says as they leave him in instant unguarded.
The poison had worked itself out.
I love that in this version, instead of like planning to escape over the course of weeks, he escapes right away.
It's Toad.
How the dickens did
Why, that unrepentant...
So, I've talked before about alternate interpretations of the story. There's one called The Wildwood, that's probably the most famous of many that retells the story from the view of the Wildwooders, who understandably aren't big fans of the main characters and their idyllic life stories and their money and their capitalist bullshit. And then, there's also one version called, I think it's a short story, and it's called, like, Some of Us Have Been Threatening Our Friend Mr. Toad, or something like that, which is basically repaints the Toad's friends as, like, abusers, basically, who are using the excuse of wanting the best for him to do horrible things to him. And while I don't think they're ill-meaning in the actual story, I can totally see where that interpretation would come from, because, like, you can't actually, like, lock somebody in their house and, like... It's like when they were talking about Britney Spears' conservatorship. I did see some stupid people arguing, like, if they take her out of the conservatorship, she's just going to ruin her life. It's like, she's a grown woman. It's actually not anybody's business whether she ruins her life. She's an adult. She can ruin her life if she wants. Same thing here. You actually do have the right to make stupid decisions and face legal consequences for it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that immediately after trying to lock him up, he steals a car and lands himself in prison.
the public danger and third of the most gross impertinence to the police. Mr. Clark, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest
Weirdly, these characters look like
without, of course,
they're from The Wall. They look like the characters from the trial sequence in The Wall. Let me just do snuff in this children's film while I'm
some people would consider
presiding over my court. I've heard of judges doing worse things.
cheeking the police should carry the severest penalty.
British people take cheek very seriously.
Which is mild.
And Toad is like, oh good, because as I mentioned earlier, I am dummy. Yes, thank you.
And as for the cheek, which, as we have heard, was pretty bad, let us
I love the absurdity of this scene, that they just have like this actual amphibian on the bench.
grand total of 19 years.
So if you caught that, it was 1 year for stealing the car,
To be on the safe side.
3 years for wrecking it, 15 years for mouthing off the police, and then they added an extra year to make it around 20. Like, damn. At least Jean Valjean only got 5 years for stealing the bread. The additional 14 were for his repeated escape attempts. Why can't toads get fair representation in our justice system? Really makes you think. No, it doesn't. But seriously, this does kind of have a dark undertone when you consider the bipolar interpretation, because this would be an era where someone would get locked up in a sanitarium for having bipolar disorder. In this era, in 1908 is when this book was published, bipolar disorder wouldn't have been called that. It would have been called manic depression or manic depressive disorder. And there wasn't really a way available to treat it. The medications you would take for it straight up did not exist, because this is pre-pharmaceutical revolution. So it was and therapy was worthless. I don't know what the timeline is, but I don't even think Freud was practicing. If he was, it was early. And I don't think Freud would be much help to you if you're bipolar. And the fact that Toad gets slapped with a really, overly heavy prison sentence for something he did while he was manic, it does kind of paint, this very tragic tone to it. That is a pitiful sight.
Handsome Toad. For the rich and hospitable Toad. How can I hope ever to be set free? Toad!
So, I'm a little confused about the rats in this sequence. Can they talk? Why are they so much smaller and more animal-like than the animals? I don't get the animal class system at all. Is anyone else really weirdly fascinated with the politics of the animals and humans in this world? How many adaptations focus on that? So, in the book, at least, there's kind of this comedic sort of air, I guess, to Toad's lamentations in prison, because they're so over the top. And while that is kind of present here, it also does seem as genuinely tragic. Something about the lighting and just how rough he looks, and of course Rick Mayall's very likable voice work. I don't know. With the Cosgrove Hall version, I did read that they had a hard time casting someone who could make Toad likable, because it's very easy to fall in the trap of making him seem overly bratty or entitled, and you need to have an actor who can make you remember that he does have good qualities, or at the very least can be likable.
Oh, hapless Toad!
Ultimately, for Cosgrove Hall, they ended up finding David Jason, who was an excellent Toad. I think Rick Mayall might be my personal favorite, but David Jason is the one I grew up listening to, like I said, so I am very fond of that voice as well. So, have I mentioned this already? I just love how the animation on Toad is able to keep up with how manic Rick is. The expressions here are so good.
Bestowed on so many fat, red-faced policemen.
Well, you don't sound sorry at all. So, Toad is usually the most popular character, and he gets played by pretty big comedy stars in a lot of adaptations. I actually found one that came out before this that was from a series of TV specials, I guess, where Toad was voiced by Hugh Laurie, and that's pretty great. This, of course, was his pre-House days, where he was primarily known as a comedic actor, and it's pretty amusing to because I started watching House only recently, and after seeing him into that and going back to his Wind in the Willows stuff, where he does a very flamboyant and high-pitched Toad.
Generous Toad, so royally
Me lodge a complaint! I don't know. I can't really do it without listening to it, but it's you just hear this very foppish voice, and you're yeah, that's House. So they don't emphasize this in this adaptation. Did I talk about this already? But at this point in his prison sentence, Toad has been refusing food for several weeks with the apparent intent of starving himself, and it actually takes several attempts from the jailer's daughter to actually get him to eat something. It also,
very rich, Miguel.
this is an era where prison did not have to be a punishment if you were rich. Basically, how hard your prison sentence was dependent on how much you were willing to pay. So like in French prisons, I know, like if you were rich, you could actually like get pretty nice furniture, books, even servants while you're in prison. Really pisses you off, doesn't it? But even though the jailer points out that Toad is rich enough to afford all that, he refuses and is just languishing in misery in his cell, which could be read as a depressive episode if he really is bipolar.
To an arrangement.
To be free?
When her comes directly, her
It's a little bit shocking to see a woman in this movie, because there aren't a lot of them.
and everything will be alright, you see.
In fact, this is only one of 3, and we don't actually see the washerwoman trade places with Toad in this version, so the washerwoman is just kind of a cameo.
Hello, old friend.
Well,
Had a nice day.
3 in the animated sequence. Obviously, Vanessa Redgrave is our narrator, and there are a few. She's got her granddaughters with her in live action statement, but
Pals,
whatever.
how's your supper with the otters?
Something's the matter.
So the vignette structure works better in the book, but this is one of the bits that, like, it just kind of seems that we're weird that we're cutting back to this in the midst of Toad's escape, especially since Toad's escape is, let's face it,
Those feet.
the part of the movie at this point that makes more
Save
sense.
your concern for the otters. Young
This upcoming chapter is the other part that usually gets left out of adaptations. That's called the Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And this actually inspired a Pink Floyd thing, I think. I don't remember if it was like an album or a song or what. I'm not a huge Pink Floyd fan, but it is weirdly fitting that I mentioned The Wall earlier. This is by far the weirdest chapter of the novel. I guess we'll get back to it after we check back in with Toad. But, we'll talk about it more when we get to it. So the reason he was all indignant said, "Do you mind?" and I'm a little sad that we didn't get to see this in this version, is that a lot of the men in this prison know the washerwoman, because she always comes in to do the washing. And these men have been locked up working in this prison for a long time, all the guards and sentries and stuff. And as a result, Toad, on his way out of this prison, basically kind of gets sexually harassed by these men. None of them lay a finger on him, but they make it very clear that that is what they'd like to do. And I think the novel has a description of him, like, having to outright dodge one guy that tries to throw his arms around him at one point. Because these guys are so desperate for female attention that, God, it's like dogs when you drop one bone.
And got some nippers awaiting for you, dare say.
So I do think this whole
I tell you what,
Toad's whole escape is just a really good mix of, like, comedy and, like, genuine tension.
up with you then.
Nobody notices that the tiny green-skinned woman is, like, a toad.
Admit it, Toad, old boy. You are a marvel.
For being able to execute the idea that the jailer's daughter comes up with. So even though her scenes are short in this movie, she only had the one scene. Well, 2 scenes if you count when we first saw her.
Why, you're probably the greatest actor in England. And you're once again free, my dear fellow.
I don't really change my expressions that much when I monologue to myself in my head. So the jailer's daughter, it's actually kind of funny because the way she views Toad kind of has this,
I've just escaped from a loathsome
sheds a weird light on how humans view animals in this world. When she argues from her dad to, like, take over
Prison 4.
only borrowing a car.
for looking after Toad, she says, "You know how fond I am of animals, Daddy, and I bet I could make him sit up and eat from my hand and do all sorts of things." It's like, what? Lady, you know this guy owns a house, right? He has a criminal record, he probably pays taxes, or at least evades taxes. That she would talk about him like he's an animal that she found on the street is really funny. And also what's really funny is that, like, she's asking about his neighbors and his house and stuff because she's interested in animals, wants to know how they live. And there's one line, it's one of those sarcastic lines from the novel where he says, he had the good sense not to say that she viewed animals as pets because she could see that he would be offended. I'm like, they still keep animals as pets? Are they also talking animals? And then there's the thing that the Toad thinks the reason that she's helping him is because she's fallen in love with him, which is 100% not true.
Sometimes the beauty
And, like, he...
go. Fainter now and then stronger.
And he says it's a shame because, not because she's a human and he's a toad, but because their social gap between them is too wide, since she's just a jailer's daughter and he's a rich
place of what he called his song
mansion owner. And it's so absurd. The story is pretty wild. Speaking of wild, this is the Greek god Pan. Want to know why he's here? So would I, but he is. Basically, the idea, though it isn't explained very well in either the novel or this movie, is that Pan is the god of the animals in the same way Jesus is the god of humans. So, Mole and Ratty basically have this religious experience where Pan leads them to Otter's missing child and then disappears. And the idea is that, and it's not conveyed very well in this movie, sadly, is that as soon as Pan disappears, Ratty and Mole forgot that they ever saw him. Because the sight of Pan is so wondrous and amazing, and you feel so happy after you see him, that he has to wipe your mind afterward, because otherwise you wouldn't ever be able to enjoy anything in your waking daily life ever again. It's like,
because of you.
what? Why did this happen? Why did they have this experience? Why did they just forget about it? You can kind of see why this chapter gets cut, because it's so weird, and it just happens, and if you don't understand what's going on, you're just left completely flummoxed by it. People, like a decade or so ago, used to throw out the term big-lipped alligator a lot. That was definitely a big-lipped alligator moment.
Lest the awe should dwell and turn your frolic
So they met God. That happened.
at the helping
This chapter, though, does have fans who say that it isn't so much about the narrative point as it is just about the atmosphere they create. And it is a pretty great atmosphere if you read the descriptions of, like, the sunrise and stuff.
helper and healer.
And the piping and, like, Rat and Mole's wonder. And, you know, it is very poetic.
Find in it.
A prose poem, maybe you would call it. Or maybe not, I don't know. But it's very easy also to, like, be watching this not knowing or expecting it and being like, why did that happen? Now, the Pied Piper of the Gates of Dawn
Forget Mr. Toad.
was not part of the Cosgrove Hall movie, which covers the original novel. It was, however, later made into an episode. And if you watch the Cosgrove Hall movie on YouTube, someone went ahead and edited in the chapters that were left out of the initial movie that were later turned into episodes. So Wayfarers All, the chapter where Ratty gets Wanderlust, was adapted in, and so was the Pied Piper.
I dare say it is to them, as isn't a poor washerwoman as needs to wear her poor old feet.
So now that I haven't really talked about Ratty and Mole's actors because I'm not as familiar with their stuff, but I know Ratty has been, early in his career, he was in a lot of Monty Python sketches. One of them he was in was the Spanish Inquisition one, and I kind of, the only reason I thought of it is because of Rick Mayall's ridiculous falsetto. Seems very Monty Pythonish to me. What's on the telly then? Looks like a penguin.
I'm in hot water again. Oh, never mind. Pooh, I say. Any fool can wash. Now then,
Again, with weirdly fluid, expressive animation here. I don't know much about the animation on this movie. I would like to know more about it, because some of these sequences definitely seem like they were done by different animators, which I think is common practice with animated movies. But, I just love it. I love that he's rich and he doesn't know how to do it.
And what I say is, washing should be left to fools. How dare you mock me, you common, low, fat barge woman?
Hey, with that dump truck, you have no right to be calling anyone fat. Exactly, thank you.
In reality, the very well-known, highly respected and distinguished Toad. So there.
What? A nasty, creepy, crawling toad?
I love that her reaction on learning that he's a toad is, ew, a toad, get the broom. It's just this very surreal relationship between the animals and humans. I love her, like, early in the movie, you might have missed it when the car makes the cart crash somehow. Ratty shouts after the speeding car, like, I'll have the law on you. Like, presumably the human law. Do animals have the power to press charges on humans in this world? I'm so fascinated by this. Can we add this to the list of long works that use cartoon animals as a metaphor for racism? Was Toad's overly long prison sentence due to the fact that he's a toad? Why doesn't her horse talk? I'm so invested in this.
Toad shall arrive home in style.
So this is a version that this adaptation adds, even though it's pretty straightforward with the book, that the judge that he runs into when he steals a car a second time is the same judge that sentences him. Whereas I don't think that was the case. It's a washerwoman who doesn't come anywhere near my knee in terms of height, even though he wasn't nearly that short during his actual trial. Ah!
Why, she looks better already. How do you feel now, Ma?
He's...
Feel better, sir.
Is that part of your skin condition? No ears? Yes.
Yes.
So this judge is the villain of The Willows in Winter, which is the sequel to this movie. The Willows in Winter also started like a whole series of sequels, all written by the same guy. Not the guy who wrote the original Wind in the Willows novel. And he's like a recurring antagonist through all of it. I'm not sure why he would have such a grudge against this toad. He's such a lovable creature. And he changed in size again. I'm reaching the pedals with the force! So, a bit of a plot hole in this story, and one that is addressed by the sequels, including The Willows in Winter, is that Toad...
Catch me if you can!
Toad escapes from prison, right? And he goes back to his house. At no point in the story does anyone make any attempt to take him back into custody or, like, add to his prison sentence for escaping. It's just, once he escapes, it's done, and he's out of danger. The Disney version weirdly plugs this plot hole up tight by having Toad be innocent. He didn't actually steal a car in the Disney version, he was framed. Which kind of ruins the story, but also it does fix that plot hole. I found out the reason for that change was because of the Hays Code. If you don't know, Hays Code was a series of very strict censorship rules for movies produced in the United States. I'm pretty sure it was the United States. One of the rules was that a character couldn't do something wrong without facing karmic justice. So a character who steals a car and then breaks out of prison and gets away with it, like Toad does, wouldn't work. So they had to change the story to make it so he was innocent.
Who all stuck up for you.
Be quiet, Molly. We decided to keep an eye on Toad Hall for you.
Keep it aired and dusted.
Very civil of
You didn't see us doing that during the other scenes because we were meeting God. I mean, I don't remember meeting God. I mean, what is this movie?
Weasels armed to the teeth.
Ha, I was closer to you
Ferrets and
earlier, but now I'm closer to Ratty.
The two of them with sticks.
So I keep praising this animation, but sometimes there are a few continuity snags here and there with, like, shot inconsistency between shots.
That's making up rude songs and jokes about you.
What?
Mole laughing and smiling again when it's inappropriate. Because there's a scene earlier when Ratty and Mole are hauling Toad upstairs, and it's a really great sequence, but unfortunately, in the next shot when they're dragging him down the hall, Rat and Mole switch positions. So they're on the opposite sides than they were in the directly previous shot in the stairs.
And I'll say,
And while you could say maybe they switch positions in between the staircase and the hall, the continuity between the audio across that scene transition makes it seem weird
oh my, won't that
that they would abruptly switch positions. And also, I mentioned how Mole's positioning between shots is inconsistent, and this scene in the house.
Tonight, they're having a banquet for the chief weasel. If the good mole's washerwoman ruse works, the stoats and ferrets would be...
And by God, if I catch any of them putting their names in the goblet of fire, I'll kill them. I will straight up I will murder them.
None of them armed, and little suspecting how we shall overpower them.
Pooh! Only 4 of us? And we'd be seen?
My young friend, your father, who was a worthier animal than some, told me things...
So this kind of sheds some light on why Badger is so invested in, like, saving Toad from himself to the point that he's willing to basically break the law, because holding someone captive in their own house is against the law. They have a term for that. It's called unlawful imprisonment. It is frowned upon in our society. Basically, the idea is that Toad's dad and Badger were really close friends, sort of like Ratty and Mole are now. That's why Badger is so invested, now that Toad's father is dead and Toad has inherited all his money, that he's trying to stop his best friend's idiot son from getting himself killed and wasting all his money. Which has to be a pretty thankless task. And I do kind of wonder, like, what kind of person Toad's dad was. You remember that vine of that kid walking away from the table weirdly, and then his dad just kind of puts his face in his hands? I kind of feel like that relationship is what Toad's relationship between Toad and his father was like. Just grab animals and start whacking. So the scene of them taking back the house is the climax of the whole story. And it is weird that it focuses much more on Toad and his issues than it does with Mole, than we started on the story and the movie with Mole. Now you could argue that because Mole participates in this charge and comes up with the plan to distract the weasels and is so invested, that this could frame the pinnacle of his character development, where he goes from the animal who lives isolated in the ground under the ground to this guy who bravely participates in a raid. But they don't really focus on that the way they focus on Toad's character development. It's not there, but it is very structurally weird.
Did you see how I said that?
The animators are having a ball with Toad. I love it.
Shortly, you will attend to our immediate needs. And tomorrow, you will give a splendid banquet to celebrate this affair.
Of course! And it'll be the finest.
You will immediately make out a guest list and then write invitations to all our friends.
I love that Badger just ordered him to set a banquet tomorrow. This place is trashed.
All over. Threw down their rifles and fled.
Now, before this ends, I should mention the uncomfortable fact that there is some classist elements in the story. I don't know the full historical context. I'm an American and I'm not super familiar with it, but basically the weasels kind of represent the lower class, like the working class, whereas our four main characters are part of the upper middle class. Now, the whole scene of the weasels taking over Toad's house and wrecking the place kind of reflects anxiety at the time about the working class rising up through the rise of communism and stuff, and a lot of anxiety the conservative elements in Britain felt at the time. Kenneth Grahame, who is no fan of the communists, did kind of write that. And this element that it gets ignored in this version, probably because of the outdated political implications, that is that the weasels are tamed by their defeated Toad Hall, and they're shown very meekly serving Toad and the other three animals, and maybe getting paid, but mostly happy just to be of service, and how the animals can pass safely through the wild wood where the weasels live without getting molested. And there's this clear know your betters kind of implication to it. Unfortunately, none of that has aged very well.
There was smashing in the window and crashing in the door. There was chivying of weasels that fainted on
I'm pretty sure these lyrics for this song are lifted word for word from the novel. And the song is really well done, and it kind of makes you a little sad that Badger didn't let him perform it in front of everyone. Anyway, even if you ignore the political implications, which are kind of hard to ignore once you know them, a bunch of people moving into your house while you're away and trashing the place is the wrong thing to do. So, the story still works as long as you ignore the uncomfortable, I hate poor people. Orden.
Well, it's entirely their loss, of course. Oh, poor fellows. Hey-ho.
What can I do to get tights like that?
And let each one of the crowd try and shout.
I don't know how often Rick Mayall sings in his career. As an American, I don't know a ton about it, but he's pretty good. And might I add, hello my baby, hello my honey, hello my... Sorry. So yeah, this is how the animated segment, whoops, so basically the movie ends with Toad walking into the party and Vanessa Redgrave narrating about his narration. So we started with Mole and we ended with Toad. Again, kind of awkward that we lose track of who we thought our main character was.
Badger was the mastermind, and Mole and Water Rat.
But, yeah, it's no wonder that a lot of adaptations choose to make Toad the main character. Screw Mole, but you really do miss something when you miss the stuff with Mole and Ratty. You're only adapting half the mood of Wind in the Willows. You miss the idyllic pastoral stuff for the more cartoony, funny stuff, but, you really need both to be a real Wind in the Willows adaptation. It's kind of inspiring in a way, with major beloved classics like this have flaws like that, like the weirdness about switching main characters and the structural things, because it shows, I think as Bennett the Sage of Anime Bandit said, a work doesn't have to be good to be important. In this case, Wind of the Willows is very good and beloved, and don't have Vanessa Redgrave narrate over the credits? That's rude. Don't do that.
There's the great Mr. Toad.
Look, if the credits are going, I'm checking out, movie. Don't do that.
The famous Mr. Mole.
So they're talking about the fact that the animals can pass safely through the weasel's neighborhood.
If they didn't behave, the terrible grey badger would up and get them.
Oh, but this was very unfair on Badger.
So Vanessa Redgrave apparently is the fastest reader in the world, since over the course of one afternoon she was willing to read the entire novel.
Gosh, yes. We might even see them.
The very next time this happens, I shall be exceedingly angry.
Bother. Oh, no.
That's what he said the first time his name ended up. I'm sorry. I feel like I've kind of spent the Goblet of Fire joke. But anyway, that was Wind in the Willows, 1995. So far, I think my favorite film version.
I'm such a clever Toad.
I kind of, Stop talking! The credits are playing! So, some people were asking online, what's the definitive version of Wind in the Willows? The definitive version is the novel. But as for what the definitive adaptation was, there really isn't one. It's sort of like Christmas Carol. A lot of different versions try to be the definitive version, but the fact of the matter is there isn't one. Everybody has their own preferences and their own versions, and because there are so many different versions and so many reinterpretations and deconstructions and all these different things, you could pick and choose which adaptation you like and which one has the cast or the story elements or what have you that you like the best and that you respond to. I haven't seen all of them. I haven't seen the live action one with Terry Jones. I haven't seen any stage versions. So probably I could spend a good amount of time just looking at various versions. But I think this one is pretty solid. The vocal performances are all really solid. Animation, gorgeous. Story has some kinks, but is mostly very charming in the way that it should be to be true to the novel. So, yeah, I really like this movie. I'm glad that I found it, and I'm happy that I was able to watch it with you guys. So, don't know how much more of, British TV movies I'll be watching, but Dragon Keeper 9600 signing off. Thanks for watching with me. Good night.